Wedding photographers, planners, etc. What's your biggest, this marriage isn't gonna last, story? Bride asked me to please get a few shots up ASAP for Facebook, which I did that night. Received a 1 a.m. phone call from the groom furious that I had made him look bad by posting pictures where his hair looked all sweaty. This was an outdoor wedding in Louisiana on July 4th at noon. They didn't last a year. One wedding I bartended about 7 years ago, the best man was giving his toast and made a joke about the size of the groom's penis. One of the male guests yelled out, "She's missing my extra 4 inches." That led to a very awkward silence, and a couple groomsmen had to hold the groom back. I later found out the guy who yelled out was an ex-boyfriend of the bride. I DJ'd a wedding maybe 10 years back. Pretty normal wedding, standard reception. They were kinda kooky, but I thought it was all in good fun. I got the gig through the bride's younger sister, who was a friend of mine. I ran into her later, and asked her how her sister and new husband were doing. "Not great," she said. Turns out, the day after the wedding, the groom took all the checks and cash they had been gifted, and went on a shopping spree. Best Buy, Guitar Center, Dick's Sporting Goods, REI, and other similar stores. Spent like $5,000 in 5 hours. Blew all their money. I don't remember exactly what all he got, but the most ludicrous thing that sticks with me was 2 iPod Touches. One for music, and one for audio books. It was all for stuff for him. I think he got her a backpack at REI. She was not into the outdoors. They were both in their mid-30s, with established careers. His reasoning was that this was extra money, and now that they are going to be putting their incomes together, they can spend more. I lost touch with the sister, so I have no idea if they're still together. But if they are, it took lots of therapy and compromise. I was the wedding DJ for a couple with large Italian and Irish families. Knew things would get wild when they did patron shot toasts instead of the traditional champagne. Had an idea it wasn't going to last when the cops shut the wedding down after an ambulance carted a girl off on a stretcher who got punched in the face by some dude. Bride pouted through all of her photos because I couldn't magically make 2 hours of photography happen in a 35 minutes we had. She legit wanted 4 locations, all family formals, and wedding party shots done in just over a half hour. From all that I saw at the wedding, it seems like she doesn't get told no a lot. She was a nightmare to work with, and the venue's coordinator literally did a happy dance once it was over. Pre-pandemic Pennsylvania pro wedding photographer here with a story that is tangential, sort of in this vein. I got a call from a wedding client a few years back, all names changed, of course. "Hey, Conrad Erb, it's Jason Smith, do you remember me?" "Oh hey man, yes, I do. Been a while, maybe 5 years. How is married life?" "Well, Sandra and I loved your pictures, but things didn't totally work out. But the good news, I'm getting married again." "Oh, wow, sorry to hear that, but also congrats. I loved working with you for the first wedding, and wanted to see if you could shoot the second wedding down in Florida." "Sure, happy to talk about it. So, who are you marrying? What's the story?" "Well, do you remember Nicole?" Sorry, remind me." "Nicole was one of Sandra's bridesmaids." "Oh, really? No kidding. Yup. Less than, seen greater than." Photographer here. Had a groomsman hit on me all night. Kept putting his hands on me. Told the bride and groom I was getting uncomfortable and they both just laughed at me. Ended up literally following me to the bathroom and started grabbing my boobs and trying to kiss me. Had to throw him off of me and told the bride and groom I was leaving after their dances, 1 hour before I was scheduled to leave. They tried to sue me over it. Now they're divorced. Lol. This will last 5 months or 50 years. The bride and groom started a food fight during the reception at a military wedding. During a wedding music planning session with the bride, groom, and their mothers, a tense moment occurred that didn't bode well for long-term harmony in this couple's relationship. For the wedding processional, the mother of the bride insisted on having "Here Comes the Bride," just as had been played at her wedding years ago. The groom, however, wanted "Trumpet Voluntary," as had been used at his mother's wedding. All 4 of them then started arguing amongst themselves, each determined to prevail. To bring peace to the situation, I simply said, how about a compromise? All play, Here Comes the Bride, for the processional and Trumpet Voluntary, for the recessional. They all just looked in silence, then said, why, yes. I edit the videos. I was told by my boss that there was no sparkler exit for this wedding, and to cut most of the ending, because the groom was too drunk and the bride was crying. But I think the groom took something, cause he looked high. Anyway, I don't have a huge amount of confidence in the longevity of that one. As a 15-year veteran of the wedding industry, it was whenever the groom's mom tried to control the wedding. Audio guy here. Groom passed out not once but twice during the ceremony. Like standing there. Gee, this guy isn't looking well, bam. Groom on the deck. Smelling salts. We get him up. Get him some water and orange juice. Get through the vows and yep. Here he goes again. Not as bad. How about we just sit down on the steps and finish the ring ceremony? The whole time his brother, the best man, has that look like, I really should just scoop and run with him out of here. The poor bride has the worst look on her face like OMG, what do I do? 6 months later, it was over. Not me, but my sister has shot the same bride 3 times. Apparently, she sends a lot of other business too. I play in a wedding event band, and we were playing a friend of ours' wedding. I remember watching the ceremony from afar, and the whole thing was weirdly depressing. Their ceremony featured friends and family giving speeches, and all of the speeches a truly comical amount, and the vows were all about how hard marriage is. Nothing positive at all. It was hilarious to me. Later that evening I found out the groom confided in one of our bandmates that the part he was looking forward to the most in the day was hearing us play the reception. Truly ridiculous, haha. This was brought up in a past asking of this question, and not me, but whenever the bride and groom are at that moment where they cut the cake and have the ability to smash cake in each other's face. It is not doing it or not doing it, but when one of them decides to do it as a surprise on the other. If they are not communicating whether this is acceptable before the wedding or know the other person well enough to know if they should do this in front of all their family, then likely there will be issues in the future. I'm not like a pro photographer anymore, but I was asked by a friend if I would, and so as a gift I took photos of the event. Caught the wife making out with one of her bridesmaids. Made the mistake of planning my little sister's wedding in 2018. She didn't let anyone get to know the groom before her wedding. She was specifically keeping the groom's age a secret, but of course the information came out a few days before the ceremony. He was the one to convince her the secrecy was necessary. She was 24, he was 49. They had nothing in common, and it was clear she was just the trophy wife. Within a year there were big secrets that came to light. A secret house, bank accounts, a second home in another country, and a secret phone were all discovered. They didn't last long for obvious reasons. I feel bad for my parents that paid for everything. I'm not a professional wedding planner, but I was helping a buddy plan his wedding. I used to be a chef that did event planning. I called him to ask some questions. He told me to call his wife because he was on a date. WTF. So I called his wife and told her he was on a date and told me to call her. I don't know what happened after that. Neither of them have spoken to me since. Sorry, not sorry. He wasn't a close friend anyway. He asked me for help and I guess he thought I would lie for him. I hope they didn't get married. I feel really bad for that young woman, but it would have ended worse if I didn't say anything. The first dance song was The Freshman by the Verve Pipe. Not me, but a friend was the photographer of a wedding I attended. I later learned the bride was pissed the whole day. Only 2 of the 1,600 plus photos were the bride actually smiling. She was 18 and the groom was 26. Lasted about 1 year. Skeptical smiley face. The bridesmaid speech included the phrase, poke a hole in the condom, and the bride's ex's name. I got the groom's face as he turned to his 1-year-old child sitting in the granny's lap. I helped cater a wedding once and was slicing up the cake the bride and groom just cut for serving. The groom asked me if he could lick the icing off my fingers, with his new bride standing right beside him. I picked my jaw up off the floor and hid in the kitchen for the rest of the wedding. They used stacks of books as centerpieces at the tables. The books were copies of Sun Tzu's Art of War. My cousin got married. Came to find out he knocked up another chick and told her to get an abortion, go away, etc. She showed up with her friend at the wedding reception 8.5 months pregnant, hammered drunk and wearing a wedding gown and veil. She hung out for a couple hours drinking and laughing at everyone. South Dakota. Not a pro photographer, but I took photos at a super low budget wedding. It was outdoors, in a trailer park, in Nevada. Right before the ceremony a desert tornado blew right through the trailer park. Nothing big or massive, but it was enough to blow down some chairs, a few tables and some tree branches. We were inside when it went through. I'm pretty sure that was a divine sign that the marriage was not supposed to happen. They broke up a few years later because he liked hitting her. My cousin's wedding gave off, "This isn't going to work" vibes. They met at an evangelical church event, and she was a fresh college grad and he was a 30-year-old who still lived at home. He'd been fired from multiple jobs and worked as a substitute teacher. He was super into all the family traditions and pranks, and barely looked at his wife. His wife couldn't be bothered to speak to him and spent the entire wedding hanging out with her sisters. He whisked her away to a secret hotel for their wedding night, which turned out to be the only Marriott in a 50-mile radius. My grandparents only stay at Marriott, so the entire family was there. We spotted his car in the parking lot. My grandpa wrote a cute note inviting them to brunch the next morning and had us all sign it. The bride responded by threatening never to speak to us again. I've never been certain if she was serious or joking, because they divorced 8 months later after 2 miscarriages, and she never actually did speak to the extended family again. He's now a 40-year-old who lives at home and is still a substitute teacher. Marriage celebrant here. A few years back, I was marrying an 18 and 19-yo, who I think tied the knot because they had a baby. Both were massive bogans. The groom's party and his parents turned up, proceeded to throw down stubbies from the eskies in the boots of the cars. The venue owner was having kittens because they were a licensed venue and couldn't have others bring their own alcohol onto site. Didn't deter them, and they got very drunk very quickly. Eventually I went to see the groom's mum to ask her to help stop them drinking, explaining I couldn't marry a drunk person, and his witness also had to be sober. She told me to relax, and that there was no problem with it. Being able to call into question someone's ability to understand what they are entering into is a very big problem here. Bride turns up, sees the drunken shit show going down, and loses her mind, thinking the groom had to be drunk to marry her. In the end, it went ahead. I had to postpone for 2 hours to force the groom and his men to sober up. I was covered in snot and mascara from the bride sobbing into my shoulder. They didn't even last 3 months. Photographer here. I've seen some things, let me tell you. 1. Christmas time wedding. Groom's family decides they hate the bride's family during the reception. There was a lot of barefoot dancing going on at the time, so the groom's family took the glass Christmas ornaments that were the wedding favors off the tables and threw them on the dance floor. Of course they shattered and everyone got their feet cut up. This couple had been together for 5 years before getting engaged. The bride got served divorce papers less than 6 months after the wedding. She was stunned and had no idea her husband wanted a divorce. The whole thing was so freaking sad. I think about her a lot still. 2. Bride punched out her sister-in-law at the wedding reception. They spent the rest of the evening hurling random insults at each other throughout the wedding events. Since the wedding was at a remote campground, the Sill did not leave. Shooting a very fancy wedding at the Boca Resort in Boca Raton. Groom 3x divorced. Looks like George Hamilton, very wealthy, recently a great-grandfather. When asked where he'd be going for the honeymoon, he said, she travels plenty on my dollar. But maybe we'll go somewhere later this year. Bride, less than half his age, gorgeous. While alone outside the reception before entrances, when asked by a friend how it felt to be Mrs. _______, she said, "Oh, it's fine. It's whatever." Notable quote from a guest I overheard, "This is disgusting, I'm sure they're fine." I went to deliver a cake, and met the wedding planner, looking completely frazzled. I've worked with the woman a lot and we're good work friends at this point, even though we're technically in different fields. She always has her shit together, so I asked her what was wrong. She tells me the groom's boyfriend showed up to confess to the bride that he'd been with the groom longer than she had and they were in love, but the groom got to him first. They were currently sobbing in the groom's suite telling each other they loved one another and the groom saying he'd never love her like he loved him. She was running interference and trying to keep the bride happy and the mothers both out so those two could figure their shit out before she had to destroy any relationships, especially because she got the impression no one knew the groom was gay and they were on the down low super religious hipster Y types. The wedding, somehow, went on. I saw a few pictures, since the bride included them on her review of My Bakery. Groom looks miserable while she looks radiant and happy. The wedding planner told me about a year ago that she got a call from the groom's boyfriend to arrange his wedding and he was marrying another dude who basically worshipped him, which brought up the first couple, who didn't even manage a year, judging from bride's Facebook. Shocking, I know. I'm a wedding singer. One stands out where the wedding was on an unseasonably hot day in our city at a venue with no AC. The time comes to dance and none of the almost 100 guests want to be inside on the dance floor, understandably. The bride gets up to dance after dinner as we kick off and she is literally the only one on the dance floor. One of her bridesmaids joined her after 2 minutes, an eternity, because she felt bad and didn't want the bride to be alone. We heard through the planner that the bride didn't even want a big wedding. She said yes to husband's desire for a bash, but the only thing she really wanted to have was a band. So she's out here dancing her ass off, with maybe 3 or 4 people at this point. Husband could not be bothered to join her. I keep seeing him walk by, chatting with various people. At one point he has a drill in his hand to go fix something. Basically anything but dance with this poor woman, and to join in the literal only thing that she finds pleasurable about this event. He finally is chatting with someone near the dance floor and she goes over to get his attention. I see her ask him to dance, and he completely blows her off, doesn't even stop his sentence, just kind of shoves her hand away. It was so sad. She was so crestfallen that she stopped dancing and went outside. We played to an empty room for another hour and a half. I photographed a wedding and I was working with the groomsmen and groom. It was after the ceremony and the bride went off to go fix her makeup. I was probably about 70% done with the men photos when the bride starts screaming and crying asking why she isn't in any of them. I explained that this was the guy's shots and that the bride and bridesmaid shots were up next. She did not like that answer. She demanded that she be in their shots too. These kind of photos were the ones where the groomsmen are doing the goody things with the groom. She then proceeds to take my camera and throw it on the ground, shattering the lens. She then cries harder and the groom just walks away. I was so petrified. Rip Canon 6D, you will always be missed. Thanks for watching. See you later.